Hello, I'm John Clausen with the International Maritime, Chairman of the Board of the International Maritime Center here. Our mission is to welcome the stranger to our land. So we welcome seafarers, we have vans, we pick up seafarers from the ships when they come, take them to local stores or to BART or transportation, or provide a very hospitable atmosphere away from home where they can come and rest and relax a little bit from their busy difficulties. Seafarers, of course, are frequently away from home for 11 months out of the year. So we really need to welcome them, make them feel at home, and have a place away from home. And that's what we try to do here at the Seafarer Center. So anyway, I want to very much welcome all of you, the news media here, on a very tough situation. We're all concerned about sanitation when they come in. We have hand sanitizers here and a safe place for seafarers to come, a few snacks and stuff we supply them with. But anyway, all about how we can best meet the needs of seafarers here at the Port of Oakland. And with that, I can introduce then Steve Seltzer, who is with Work Week and KPOO, and Pacifica Labor Correspondent, and UPWA.
Okay, thank you, John. I appreciate the use of the International Seaman Center because I've been covering through Work Week and the media on Pacifica Labor Correspondent the issue of crewmen and the crews of these ships that come into the Bay Area. And most people are unaware of their conditions and what they have to live under, and it's virtual imprisonment in some ways. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, to protect them and also to protect the port workers who are themselves are concerned about health and safety protection, because we believe every worker should be protected. Every worker should be aware of what the dangers are of this virus, COVID-19, and how to protect themselves and their families. So that's why we've called this press conference today. And we also want to make sure that other unions who have transportation workers, education workers, and healthcare workers are protected. We covered the nurses at the University of California in San Francisco earlier this week, and one of their issues were they are having to reuse their masks at UCSF. Now, this is a real concern that we have. If nurses who are the front line have to reuse their masks, we got a real problem in this country, in this city, because that's one of the most important medical institutions in the world, actually. So we're going to have a number of speakers, and the first speaker is going to be Jack Heyman. He's chair of the Transport Workers Solidarity Committee. He's a retired ILWU Local 10 member, and also he was a former port agent for the ITF, International Transport Workers Federation, which represents crewmen, sailors in the Bay Area. So welcome, Jack.
Thank you, Steve. Well, first of all, I want to thank John and the International Maritime Center for letting us use this for the press conference. It was in 2002 when they were kind enough to let us use this facility as our strike center. In 2002, we were locked out. All the West Coast ports were shut down in a dispute with the Pacific Maritime Association, and this was our picketing headquarters right here. After the lockout, President Bush invoked Taft-Hartley on the entire West Coast. So thank you again, John, and the International Maritime Center for letting us use your facility. The occasion today is a crisis of the highest magnitude. There were 2,600 people, passengers on board, and over 1,100 crew members. The ship is infected with the coronavirus, COVID-19. Over a week ago, a helicopter dropped 45 test kits onto the deck of the Grand Princess as she was roaming around out at sea off of San Francisco. Out of that 45, 21 tested positive. That's almost half. And 19 of those were crew members. But the rest of the crew have not been tested. Passengers have been taken off and tested. As a matter of fact, now all the passengers are off the ship. Who's on the ship are over 1,100 crew members, many of whom are infected. We don't know how many. As John was saying, the International Maritime Center provides services for the crew. They can communicate with their families, send letters and things like that. The important thing is there's a crisis, a medical crisis going on. It's a pandemic around the entire world, and these crew members are not being able to communicate with the union that represents them, the International Transport Workers Federation. They've not been able to communicate with the Longshore Union, which has been of help to them over the years whenever there's a problem on the ship. This is more than a problem. This is a crisis. And what we want to see is the crew being tested. According to a statement by Assemblyman Bonta, the crew is going to all be shipped back to the Philippines, but many of them are infected already. The rest of the crew needs to be tested, and they need to be given medical treatment now. This is an international crisis, and we believe that the responsible party is the ship owners. They're sequestering the entire crew on the ship, over 1,100, in a contaminated environment. This is not the first time it's happened. Last month in Japan, the Diamond Princess was found to have contaminated passengers and crew members on the ship. They quarantined the ship and docked it in Japan. Dr. Fauci, the United States expert on this coronavirus epidemic, said that's crazy. You're building a petri dish by quarantining the crew on the ship. That's not the way to do it. All right? This ship, its home port is right here in San Francisco. The ITF is involved in a campaign called the Flag of Convenience campaign. So many of these passenger ships are owned by billionaire Americans. Like the owner of the Princess Lines and Carnival Lines is a guy by the name of Mickey Arison. He's a big supporter of Donald Trump. And these ships, the owners don't pay any taxes in the United States. They don't have crews that are actively involved in representing the crew members. And they don't abide by environmental or medical laws. They're a law unto their own. And this is a problem that we have to deal with. The ITF we'll have a statement from them read a little bit later. I want to read a statement from the International Dockworkers Council that represents 100,000 dock workers around the world. The International Dockworkers Council calls on the competent authorities and the cruise line to provide immediate medical attention in hospital conditions to those affected and to carry out the necessary checks and ensure that the rest of the crew is not affected. We want to make sure that this contamination doesn't spread. We want to make sure the crew is treated now. The Grand Princess home port is here, but its registry is in Bermuda. And that's how these big corporations, shipping companies, get around paying taxes or having unions on the ship. What we're looking forward to right now is giving that kind of aid to the crew. And the problem is that we don't have in this country competent medical care for this pandemic. And there's a reason for that. 2 years ago, the Trump administration 2 years ago eliminated the office that deals with pandemics under the National Security Council. They eliminated it. It doesn't exist. And one of the people responsible for that office said, this is 2 years ago, a quote from the Washington Post, "The threat of pandemic flu is the #1 health security concern. Are we ready to respond? I fear the answer is no." And that was Luciana Borio. She was director of one of the offices that oversees the pandemic crisis. We don't have competent leadership, and we put the blame of that on the doorstep of Donald Trump. And liberal Democrats like Bonta, who put out press releases making it sound like everything is okay, there's not a problem, are also responsible. We have people from the Filipino community here that want to address that question. The crew, half of whom are Filipino, over 600, need to be treated equally. They need to be given competent medical care. That's not happening. And we'll hear from more of them later. Thank you very much.
Sorry, before you, your name and title again one more time?
My name is Jack Heyman. I'm a former ITF, International Transport Workers Federation, inspector on the ships. I'm a retired longshoreman from San Francisco.
And you said that ITF represents the workers on that ship?
The ITF represents the workers on that ship. That's right, through an Italian union. That will be addressed by Robert Irminger, who's from the Inlandboatmen's Union, and they work with the ITF.
So our next speaker is Robert Irminger. He's the chair of the Inlandboatmen's Union in the Bay Area, and these are the workers that man the tugboats and ferry boats here in the Bay Area. So welcome, Robert.
Hi, good morning. Thank you all for showing up. I want to start by, Robert Irminger, chairman of the Inlandboatmen's Union of San Francisco. I'm here covering for my national president, Marina Secatano, who couldn't come because she's sick, unfortunately. I want to start by reading one paragraph from an ITF statement that was released, and it says, the ITF urges the relevant authorities, both the flag state, the port state, and the company, to facilitate the transit and repatriation of the seafarers so that they are able to get home quickly and safely. The ITF also wants to remind government and companies that seafarers have the right to the same level of health care and protection as the passengers. So that's very important, and exactly what Jack was saying, all these all the seafarers on the vessel, 600 Filipinos, there's also Koreans, Sri Lankans, Italians on that vessel, should get that. Unfortunately, that's somewhat cold comfort because there are not test kits available, as you all know. The passengers, several hundred of them, according to the San Francisco Chronicle, that were placed in, taken to Travis Air Force Base, have not been tested. Many of them, most of them have not been tested. So that's a real problem. We do not have the test kits to do this. And just for a larger context, there's 18 other Princess Line vessels around the world that are in dock where both the ITF and the employer are trying to repatriate them to their home countries. There's also a Costa Line vessel in the Caribbean, which is an Italian cruise ship, where they have identified either crew or passengers, I'm not sure which, with COVID-19. So this is a large question, but the immediate demands as presented should be followed through, and that is for the immediate medical attention for all the seafarers on that vessel and to be able to repatriate them to their home countries. That is the most important thing that we need to do at the moment. The ability of them to be able to communicate. Generally, a seafarer, when the ship comes in, they'll come to this seafarer center and get a SIM card. They'll generally communicate by email or text. Obviously, none of those seafarers have been able to do that more than likely, there are seafarers on the vessel that have SIM cards that could well be communicating with their families, but we have not had the ability to get direct communication with the seafarers here. And there's one other question that's also very important, and that's, and we get to the point to be able to repatriate them. The U.S. government, through Customs and Border Patrol and ICE, it's very difficult for them to be able to get the necessary documents that they'll be able to get from the ship to the airport in the U.S. to return to their home countries. So we also have that level of bureaucracy to address and to deal with. It's a multi-level problem. It's constantly moving. There's many more ships that are going to be docking that may well have similar problems. I know Carnival Cruise Lines just announced today that they will have no more ships docking in North America. It's a fluid situation, but I do know that the ITF and they are making every effort to be able to get as many of these crews from all these different vessels around the world repatriated to their home countries. But for us here in Oakland and the Bay Area, our main focus should be trying to get the immediate medical care with the crew members on that ship and find out what is going on. Thank you. And if any of the press needs the contact information of the West Coast coordinator of the ITF, Jeff Engels, is in Seattle, I can provide that after the press conference.
Thank you, Robert. One of the most important unions actually in the world historically is the ILWU, International Longshore and Warehouse Union. And they have fought for crew workers throughout the West Coast, defending their rights, their human rights, to health care, to be paid. And one of the issues that is happening right now is that crew workers at the Carnival Cruise, at Princess, are being taken off the ships and not being paid. And that's a critical issue. These workers need to help their families and help themselves. So our next speaker is President of ILWU Local 10, Trent Willis. Welcome, Trent.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Trent Willis. I'm the president of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, Local 10. And I want to touch on a few different points. The first point is that we completely support and join in the campaign to repatriate the crewmen on the Grand Princess. The ILWU's history, we have always stood for the working rights of all working people, whether unionized or not, and we still carry on that tradition today. So I would like to make that point first. The second point is we want to focus on not just the crewmen on the Grand Princess, but also all workers in this country and all over the world who seem to be taking a second fiddle to the billionaire companies and these huge conglomerates that want to ignore the fact that working people need to be protected and health and safety issues need to be addressed. Here locally, you have heard some stories coming from some of our representatives, elected officials here in the city and in Congress, saying that the port of Oakland has been thoroughly cleaned. That is not true. Okay. To address our employers, the Pacific Maritime Association, we have had several meetings with the Pacific Maritime Association where we have tried to express the state of emergency that our workers are in and the risk that we are taking by coming to work every day and possibly being exposed to the coronavirus, through whether it be through contact with other workers or contact with machinery or trucks or what have you. Our employers, under our safety code, Section 3 of our safety code, are required to have available to us safe equipment and safe working conditions to perform our jobs, and they are not doing so. We were told in a meeting yesterday that basically to look out for ourselves, and that is unacceptable. So we are happy to join the cause with other workers around the world to make sure that every worker, whether it be the Filipino workers, or whether it be the longshoremen, or whether it be a worker at McDonald's, or wherever, all workers, this should be a call to unite and to stand up for our rights as human beings. This is an absolute class struggle. It is a class struggle, and it continues to be a class struggle. And times like these show us that the class struggle can absolutely get dangerous for the poorer members of our society. So I want to make it clear that this struggle is not just about the International Longshore and Warehouse Union. Our motto is an injury to one is an injury to all. And we look forward to continuing this campaign to both protect our members and also to stand up and protect all workers. Like I said before, our employers here in the Bay Area are refusing to live up to contract provisions and requests from the workers here in the Port of Oakland, and we are very upset about that. So this is why we are here today. We think that as far as the crew members on the Grand Princess, it is another example of power and money coming before people, and that is unacceptable. The ILWU has always stood against the exploitation of the common man and woman, and we will continue as we go along to fight for the rights of all workers across the world. Thank you.
Thank you. And one of the issues that we want to raise, and Trent raised the question, what about all the other workers in California? There are 19 million workers in California. And we have learned recently from Garrett Brown that at Cal-OSHA, this is the organization which we pay for, workers pay for, to represent, to protect our health and safety. There is only one doctor and one nurse at Cal-OSHA. Only one doctor and one nurse at Cal-OSHA, and less than 200 inspectors, health and safety inspectors in California for 19 million workers. So how are workers going to be protected if the state agency responsible for their health and safety has such few staffing? So we're calling right here on Governor Newsom to immediately restaff Cal-OSHA so the workers of California are protected. It is a scandal that in California, as I said, there's only one doctor and one nurse at Cal-OSHA for 19 million workers. This is unacceptable. They have to hire the medical staff at this agency so working people have protection. So if they have a question on a job, they can call Cal-OSHA, and Cal-OSHA can come down and let them know what they need to protect themselves. So our next speaker, in their documents, there's a statement by Garrett Brown on health and safety in Cal-OSHA and what we need to do to protect the workers in California. So our next speaker is Ricky Cox. He's Vice President of ILWU Local 34. Welcome, Ricky.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ricky Cox. I am the Vice President of Local 34 ILWU Clerks Union. Clerks Union, what we do, we are the ones that move the flow of cargo. We are the ones that get the containers from one spot to the other, from imports to exports. That's what we do as a living. A lot of things that we touch on an everyday basis is keyboards. We would like to have all the keyboards on the ports clean. Everyone touch keyboards. We have members that, I'm hearing about this virus that sometimes you don't know if you have it. So if you go out, you might get a cough, you might touch a keyboard, and you're going to still type. There's two different shifts. So the next shift's going to come in, they're going to touch the keyboard. They're going to touch those keyboards not knowing that this keyboard could be contaminated. They're going to take that home to their families. Their families live in the Bay Area. Now we're infecting people, and that's not what we want to do. The equipment, to me, we were told that the equipment, I asked for the equipment to be detailed. I need the equipment to be fumigated. We need the equipment to be fumigated up and down the coast. All equipment needs to be cleaned before we get in the equipment. We were told to get some wipes and just wipe it down. That's not our job to just get some wipes and wipe it down. That puts us in a hazard risk. That's not what we want. our employers just want to give us some wipes and send us to work. But remember, we were the front line for this coronavirus, which was the mecca of our nation of the coronavirus. Now we might have, no matter how many people on that ship might have it. So you take us that work the ship and the crewmen that work the ship right there, and we're treated the worst out of the whole situation. Luckily, we haven't had one report of a longshoreman, of the 2,000 longshoremen that's in the ILWU that's here, and maybe it's 30,000 up and down the coast that hasn't had it. So what we're trying to do is be proactive before a port has to shut down because people have the coronavirus. So it only makes sense for us to be proactive and get everything clean, and that starts with the equipment, and from the equipment and the inside of the equipment to inside of the buildings, to the keyboards, to the doorknobs, everything. And it should be done in between shifts. We got 2 shifts. You have a day shift and a night shift. So if the day shift leave, somebody should be coming in cleaning them bad boys. Or before we start work, and I'm talking to all longshoremen up and down the coast, before you start work, you know your safety codes. The first thing you're going to do when you go to your truck, go take your truck in between those go take your equipment and get it clean before you start work. You don't start no shift, you don't do nothing until you get your truck clean. If that's how they're going to play this game, that's going to stop work product. They're going to be upset at that. But that's what we got to do if they don't want to do it. First thing you do at the beginning of your shift, go get your truck clean. Clean your truck out, because if that's all they want to give us is wipes and napkins, stuff like that, then it's going to take us about 30 to 40 minutes, and that's going to put us back on production. I would like to thank everybody for coming out. I am speaking up for everybody that's a worker out here, and hopefully that every boss or everybody that's in a place of power understand how this virus works, and we try to keep all areas clean. Right now, also, we were told that we don't have any hand sanitizer for us on the port. All we have is they're going to try to get us some wipes. To me, that is unacceptable also. We understand that it's been a mass hysteria to get these products, but we need these now on the ports. That's why we're here. That's why we're talking to you. That's why we're getting our story out. And thank you guys for coming. Thank you.
Now, as we said before, this is a human rights issue. This is a worker rights, a human rights issue. And the issue of the crew, the largest part of the crew are Filipinos. And I think they're getting second-class treatment. If these were white, rich people or from Europe, they would probably be treated better. But that is the history of the treatment of Filipino workers in the United States and minority workers. Our next speaker is Terry Vallon. He's director of the Filipino Community Center, president of the National Alliance for Filipino Concerns. Welcome.
Thank you all for inviting us here today. We're very proud to be here with the workers, with the communities here in Oakland and San Francisco. I'm the director of the Filipino Community Center and the president of the National Alliance for Filipino Concerns. We're here today to stand with you all to demand justice, health and safety for the workers and for everyone. So we'll hold this right here. This is our flag right here. At any given moment, there's about 400,000 Filipinos working on the ships all over the world. The maritime shipping vessels, the cruise lines, the fishing vessels, probably closer to 500,000 Filipinos working on those ships. And we've heard, as others have mentioned, through the ITF and folks working with those workers, representing them in the unions, that there are horrific conditions on those ships, abuse and exploitation, harassment and discrimination, even the health and safety conditions that are sometimes terrible, and even death of Filipinos on these ships. And they're not getting the treatment as workers, but also as basic human beings, the health and safety they need on the ships, that they're helping move goods around the world, just like the longshoremen are at the ports. The trucks that are moving things around, these ships are moving things around the world, and Filipinos at the heart of that. Also on these cruise lines, taking care of passengers, making sure that folks can get around safely. They're cooks, they're cleaners, they're entertainers. They do everything on those ships to keep the economy moving on the ships and people moving around the world. Now in this pandemic health crisis, now's the time that we make sure we take care of them too. There's not discrimination or harassment or any kind of second-class treatment of them as workers on these ships. What we need right now in this crisis is many people, all of us have been working really hard right now, is to put all hands on deck. It's a crisis and we're all responding. We're all working hard. This is time for transparency right now. We need full cooperation from all sectors. We need government action for passengers and for the workers on the ship and at the Port of Oakland here as well. We need humanitarian relief and health and safety resources that we all need to mobilize as a whole society. And we need the repatriation of all workers, not just the Filipinos that, as I mentioned, there's other ethnicities and nationalities on board. They need to get back to their home countries and the Philippines and all countries around the world. And the workers need economic relief and job security for themselves, their families, and their livelihoods moving forward. So the Princess and Carnival cruise lines need to be responsible for taking care of those workers as well. What we need right now from the companies and government is more transparency, emergency action, full cooperation. And we don't need things like Trump saying, don't let this ship dock in the Bay Area because we don't want those numbers adding to the numbers in the U.S. That's inhumane. That's ridiculous. And we also want to make sure that, instead of leaving the ship out to sea, it's like a petri dish of more kind of health conditions where more people can get infected. They need to disembark. That's a contaminated ship and situation where we need to get those folks off of the ship back home to their families, safe and with healthy health and safety. And, at the SEC and through NAFCON, we as grassroots community organization are mobilizing ourselves in all the different ways. We mobilize over $1 million in grassroots relief donations when there's a typhoon in the Philippines, when there's recently a volcanic eruption in the Philippines. We move ourselves and our communities forward and make sure that everybody has what they need. And that's what the government needs to do. That's what Carnival Cruise and others need to do. We're doing our part, and we expect and demand that the Carnival and Princess Cruise Lines and the elected government officials do the same. When we heard of this happening and Trump saying he wanted to keep it offshore, or even when we didn't hear in the statement that the workers would be allowed off and repatriated, just the passengers, and we're going to push the ship back out to sea, we're saying that's not how we want to treat the workers on board or any of the workers. And we want to make sure the workers as well here at the ports are taken care of and are safe and secure as well. It's in this spirit that we stand again with our brothers and sisters in labor to demand that the U.S. and Philippine governments and the cruise lines ensure the health, safety, well-being, and security, again, not only of the thousands of passengers, but also the 1,100 crew members, and that the port workers here in Oakland are taken care of as well. It's time for all of us to step up, and we appreciate the efforts of some of our officials to step forward to make sure we're in communication. We heard the Philippine consulate is in communication with some of the workers, again, through Facebook, I think, is how they're reaching some of the workers. But beyond that, the workers' voices and their leadership needs to be at the forefront of this crisis. We have NAFCON and our organizing partners across the country are in Long Beach, we're in LA, we're in San Francisco and Oakland. We've got folks in Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington, Chicago, Louisiana, Texas, Boston, New York, New Jersey, Washington, D.C., Florida, and all the way out to Hawaii. We're there on the ground in our communities. We want to work together with the International Trade Federation, the longshoremen, and everywhere where our Filipino seafarers who are on ships around the world can have access to all of our communities and all the solidarity from our labor organizations. We stand ready to support our brothers and sisters in labor so we can reach out to each other and stand together for our kababayan, our countrymen, and all workers to ensure their health and safety and the dignity and rights of all workers in times of crisis and every day. So we thank you for inviting us here today, and we're going to do everything we can together side by side. It's all hands on deck, and we're right here with you all.
Thank you, Terry. And this is a global pandemic, and one thing we want to make clear here is that this isn't an issue. It didn't come, it's not one people, it's not Chinese, it's not African, it's not European, it's a global crisis. And we don't want to have racism play a part in how people are treated. Chinese are under attack in this country now, Chinese restaurants. We have to oppose the racism, the xenophobia that is being used by some to blame people because of their nationality, that they're responsible for this crisis. Our next speaker is Janabi Pareja with Migrant NorCal.
Good morning, everyone. Once again, my name is Janabi Pareja. I'm a chairperson of PAWI's East Bay, also a spokesperson for Migrant, United States, USA. It's an alliance of different immigrants and workers organizations here in the United States that works directly for the rights and welfare of Filipinos here and also abroad. So let me paint you a picture first real quick in terms of the situations in the Philippines. There's about 6,000 Filipinos that leave the country every day. So it's not a surprise to me when I heard the numbers of more than 50% of this ship, the ship crew, are Filipino. It's not surprising to know that there's about close to 500,000 of what Terry said earlier of Filipino ship crew workers around the world. What's really interesting into the fact is that what's the difference between workers being treated the same as passengers who paid to go onto this trip? Why is there a limitation of test kits that's being provided only for the quote-unquote paid passengers, but not the workers who is cleaning the room, cooking the food, being an entertainment to people here? Let's make a class difference between the two, and let's call it what it really is, right? It's the exploitations of our workers in our community. How do we demand the companies, not just companies in the shipyards, but everywhere, to demand them how to better, support the workers who actually makes this economy thrive? How do we know that they're just, currently right now, from our understanding, that they're continue still working while there's a pandemic or this situation of coronavirus that's happening within the community or within this such an enclosed space? How do we ensure that they're actually getting an adequate medical attention inside? How do we ensure that folks are actually being taken care of inside? But what's interesting is we don't know. That's their lack of media. There's a lack of information that's being communicated to the city. Just think about the family members of those people who's inside. Can you put yourself in that position? Think about well, what if that was my family? I would want to know that they're treating fairly, they're being adequately tested, but as far as I know, they're probably still working, right? So one of the things that we really want to, as part of Pauwis and Migrante USA, is that they get home safely, but before they get home safely, we're not just going to send those workers there back in the Philippines without being tested and getting adequate medical services here. That's just you putting a Band-Aid into the situation that, you know what, I'm just going to send them, then it's not my problem anymore. It won't even be in my quota. It won't even be in these numbers. But you know what, that's other people's problem. How could that be humane to think that that is other countries' problem when it is the companies themselves that put people in danger? This situation is nothing new. This happened in Japan. Now they're being quarantined in an area in Clark Bates in the Philippines. But this puts us in magnifying glasses to what's happening also in our government and also in the Philippines. One thing that we receive is that they've actually received a 10,000 pesos as a payment for lost wages. But it's 10,000, which is equals to about $200 enough for lost wages, medical attention, or anything that goes beyond that. What will happen to their job security? Majority of these workers are contractualized workers. As was said before, this shipment is for in the Bermuda so they can evade tax. Is evading tax more important than the quality and assurance of healthy people that's working for your company? I would not think so. The second is that how do we ensure that when they get quarantined and or receive this medical treatment that they will get their jobs back? How can we secure demanding their job security when they get back? Because usually majority of the time people who are Filipinos abroad are the one that's making the money for the whole family. Second is that knowing that when they go back to the Philippines, there's this promises that we've been hearing from Rob Bonta's office or promises in the U.S. government or the Philippines government. But do you all know that people in the Philippines to get tested, they're still having to pay out of pocket for this test? People can afford this test, so they would rather not get tested. So you put in the dichotomy, it's would you rather pay to get tested or buy food on the table? Let that sink in there first in terms of what we put our workers, our vulnerable workers, at stake. We appreciate the worker solidarity that we've been seeing here today. We know that it's not just Filipinos that are on board. There are different ethnicity or different backgrounds in this board, but we really appreciate that there is a strong international solidarity of workers here in Oakland specifically and workers in the Philippines abroad. But I just want to urge about this strong false promises that people in our government really would like to throw out there. But let those promises be in a reality for our people. Lastly, one of the things that we want to shed upon is that let this be a magnifying glass of the Philippines, that if the Philippines continue to do human rights violation and continue to violate people's rights, the U.S. itself, we demand to stop the U.S. Tax or U.S. Support in terms of the Philippines. If it continues to do that, how do we ensure that those money is actually being shifted to the betterment and the medical attention that some of our community needs? So once again, thank you for giving us time and having a conversation with you all in this press conference today.
Thank you, Janabi. The labor movement in the United States has sought to fight for particularly Asian American workers. And with us today is Norman Ten. He's with the Asian American Labor Alliance. He's a San Francisco chapter president. Norman.
Good morning. My name's Norm Ten, and I'm proud to serve as the chapter president for the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance. I'm also one of the National Executive Board members. This is the first and only group that recognizes that basically for Asian Pacific Islander workers. We're here to support the workers. This is all about human rights and worker rights. And it's really important to actually understand the human part. The human part is this, that it's somebody's sister, somebody's wife, daughter, husband, son. They're out there on that floating incubator, waiting to fulfill that contract that they signed with the employer. Are you kidding me? As you know, at the bottom of the contract, most likely, it says, and other duties as assigned. Well, quite frankly, I don't think getting sick and dying on the ship qualifies as duties as assigned. No. We're talking about people. We're talking about human beings. Yes, you've heard other speakers talk about, yes, there's many, many immigrant workers there. And with that, yes, good number of them, hundreds and hundreds, are Filipino workers. But they are all workers. And with that, we've got to recognize that. So we're calling for the governments and the ship owners to do the right thing. We, as Americans, believe in doing the right thing. And we need to make sure that everybody else knows this and does it. We are in a pandemic. As a former biologist for 27 years, I know what a pandemic is. You can't hide. You can't just run away from it. To put that ship off the coast of California or wherever, guess what? It's still there. People are still there. It will affect family lives. And that's all I want to say, is that we need to support the workers. It's about human rights. It's about worker rights. It's about treating each other as a human being. Thank you.
Our last speaker is Dr. Navin Gordon, who's spent his life defending working people, poor people, and fighting for health care for all. So welcome, Dr. Navin Gordon.
I just wanted to say that yesterday there was a press conference that Trump and Pence gave saying how they've done a wonderful, terrific job of taking everybody to Canada and England. Everything's going wonderfully. Well, actually, that's not true. As a matter of fact, what we have here is a crime scene. We have medical malpractice and criminal negligence. where 1,000+ crew members are still on a contaminated ship without testing, without medical care, without any plans to do what they did to all the passengers. And we live basically in a criminal system that spends 3% of all the money spent on health, on public health. The public health service in this country has been decimated over the decades. So without having a public health system and a public health service that can meet the needs of the people in a crisis, we find ourselves in the problem we're in now. So I support everything you're doing here, and I think we need to stick to the demands. That ship, all those people, all those workers need to come off right now, and they need to be treated exactly as everyone has said before, just like the passengers were, and every other ship has to be dealt with in the same way. Thank you very much.
Media here.
Yeah, could you clarify, so the demand at this point is that the ship is disembarked here in Oakland and then the crew members are treated here in Oakland? Is that the demand?
That's correct. We're saying that the ship should not leave the port of Oakland until it's evacuated of all the crew. All the crew have the right to get off. They should be treated here. When you send them out to sea, you're not going to have proper care. And also what we learned from the Diamond Princess, they said that they kept them on the ship. It was a Petri dish where they would all become contaminated. How can you go in quarantine, and this is what some people are saying, that you can quarantine these crewmen on a contaminated ship? Think about that. How can you quarantine these workers on a contaminated ship? Impossible. They have to be evacuated from the ship. They have to be given medical treatment, medical care and tested, and the ship then should be decontaminated. You can't do it by quarantining human beings on a ship. Imagine anyone in this world want to be decontaminated on a quarantined ship, on a contaminated ship. It really is something that we have to raise up and say, no way. This is not the way to treat human beings. And the other thing is, if they send the ship someplace else in the bay, what happens to the workers there? What protections do they have? There's been complete silence. We haven't been interviewed by the doctor on that ship. Where's the doctor on the ship? There's one doctor on the ship. Has he been interviewed? Do people know what he's facing? Do people know how people are being treated on the ship? How many medical workers on the ship? There's no reports. There's no reports. The Homeland Security and the Coast Guard have kept people off the ship. This office here has not even been able to allow to give SIM cards or to meet with the ship workers for clerical purposes. You know, if they have faith, if they want to pray, they don't even have access to faith people here. So why the secrecy? We're saying we have to open it up. There has to be transparency, and these workers on that ship have the right to speak out and say how they're being treated.
Who are the key decision makers that you're hoping to get through to right now?
Well, Governor Newsom, when he was questioned at the press conference about the evacuation of the ship, he was asked by the press at his press conference, what about the crew? And he didn't have anything to say about the crew. Well, this ship is in California. It's in the city of Oakland. Cal-OSHA should be on that ship. Cal-OSHA should have people go on the ship and make an investigation. What are the health and safety conditions of the workers on that ship? That's the job of Cal-OSHA. That is the law in California. Enforce the law. The law says Cal-OSHA has the right to go on ships and other work locations and find out what the health and safety conditions are. What we're saying is Cal-OSHA should be on that ship. But the problem, with, as I brought up before with Cal-OSHA, there's only one doctor and one nurse for 19 million workers in California. They don't even have the staff. But that being said, they still are responsible for the health and safety protection of those workers, and we know that they're health and safety concerns. Chuck.
Yeah, you know, this isn't just our... This is not just our position here about what to do with the crew. The best expert on coronavirus, COVID-19, is Dr. Fauci. We've had the exact same conditions that happened on the Diamond Princess in Japan last month. And he said you cannot quarantine people on an infected ship. Now, the Port of Oakland, Carnival Cruise Lines, Princess Cruise Lines are doing the exact same thing. Again, that's the definition of insanity. when you do the same thing twice and expect different results. That's the problem. They're not adequately taking care of the situation.
Trent?
One last thing. We're absolutely here trying to make the connection that this is another example of big business putting profit before human lives and safety. Okay, whether we're talking about the crewmen on the Grand Princess, or whether we're talking about the longshore workers in the port, or whether we're talking about the clerks, whether we're talking about any workers, whether union or not, big business is putting profits before safety and families. This is the point we want to hammer to all people. This should be a sign and an opportunity for all of us to connect together and to make one big union, and we have to look out for ourselves. We cannot depend on the employers and our government. You see that our government is very ill prepared for this situation. We have to look out for ourselves. We have to come together as a unit, and we have to fight for our rights and our lives.
Congress just passed a bill, the United States Congress, to provide temporary sick leave and health care for people who get coronavirus. But basically, we have a right in this country. Every human being and every American should have the right for complete Medicare and complete health and safety protection. What I think Brother Trent said, President of the ILWU Local 10, is if that's going to happen, it has to happen by working people in this country organizing to do it. Nobody is going to give it to you. Nobody is going to save the American people except themselves. If people expect the government to take care of you, I wouldn't hold my breath. That's what we're saying here. You have to self-organize. You have to start getting organized to protect yourself. And that's what we had this press conference for. This is an alert, a warning to all working people, longshore, port workers. We have to get organized to protect our health and safety, demand our rights. No one else is going to do it for us.